Listen to me. Some of you have been crying over people who walked out, over betrayals that cut deep, over wounds that still ache. But what if I told you God wanted them to hurt you? I know it doesn't make sense right now. I know it feels unfair, but hear me. Sometimes God allows the betrayal, the rejection, the heartache to break you, but to make you. He let them wound you, not to destroy you, but to reveal you. You were too attached, too comfortable, too trusting in people who were never meant to go where God is taking you. Oh, but I came to tell somebody today their attack was the very thing God used to set you up for your next level. Pain is a divine tool in the hands of God. It is not accidental, nor is it without purpose. The very thing you thought would break you, the very wound that still aches in the quiet of the night, is the same thing God is using to shape you, mold you, and prepare you for the destiny He has ordained for your life. You see, pain has a way of unlocking doors that comfort would have kept closed. If life were always easy, if people always treated you right, if every season was filled with sunshine and joy, you would never grow, you would never stretch, and you would never become the version of yourself that God saw when He formed you in your mother's womb. Think about it. Every major move of God in your life has been preceded by a season of discomfort. Some of you wouldn't have even prayed the way you do now if pain had not pushed you to your knees. Some of you wouldn't have stepped into your calling if betrayal had not forced you to seek God's direction. Some of you wouldn't have discovered your strength, your resilience, your anointing if heartbreak had not shaken you to your core. Pain is not your enemy. Pain is your instructor. It teaches you lessons that blessings never could. It reveals things in you that success would have kept hidden. The reason pain is so powerful is that it strips away the unnecessary. It cuts away the distractions. It forces you to focus. When you go through pain, you don't have time for meaningless conversations, for toxic relationships, for shallow living. Pain prioritizes your life. It makes you evaluate who really belongs in your circle and who was only there for what you could give them. It makes you see what really matters, what is truly valuable, and what is just a waste of time. Pain sharpens your vision. It gives you clarity. It separates what is temporary from what is eternal. And here's the thing, God will not always remove the pain immediately because He knows it is doing something in you that nothing else could. He allows it to do its work. He lets it dig deep so that when He does bring you into your next season, you won't be carrying dead weight. You won't be dragging people who were never meant to go with you. You won't be held back by old mindsets, old wounds, or old fears. Some of you are in that painful place right now, and you're asking God, why me? Why did they do this to me? Why did I have to go through this? But God is saying, I know it hurts, but trust me. I'm using this pain to refine you. I'm using it to strengthen you. I'm using it to pull things out of you that you didn't even know were inside of you. Because the truth is, there are gifts in you that only pain could reveal. There is a strength in you that only pressure could produce. There is an anointing on your life that only suffering could unlock. And if you run from the pain, you run from the process. If you despise the pain, you despise the transformation. If you resist the pain, you resist the power that comes with it. So instead of asking God to take the pain away, ask Him to let it accomplish what it was sent to do. Instead of fighting against it, lean into it. Instead of seeing it as a curse, recognize it as the tool God is using to prepare you for something greater. The pain is not a punishment, it is a preparation. It is not there to destroy you, it is there to develop you. It is not a sign of God's absence, it is a sign of His presence working in you, molding you, shaping you for what's next. When you understand this, you stop complaining about the pain. You stop asking, why me? And start asking, what are you trying to teach me, Lord? You stop seeing yourself as a victim and start seeing yourself as a vessel. You stop seeing your wounds as weaknesses and start seeing them as evidence that you survived, that you overcame, that you are still standing. Because pain is not the end of your story. It is the tool that God is using to write your next chapter. And when He is done, you will look back and say, it was good that I was afflicted. It was good that I was betrayed. It was good that they left me. It was good that I cried those tears. Because without it, I wouldn't be who I am today. So don't despise the pain. Let it do its work. Because when God is finished, you won't even recognize the person you used to be. You will have new strength, new wisdom, new faith, and a testimony that will shake the gates of hell. Because pain is not your prison, it is your platform. Pain is not your death sentence, it is your resurrection moment. Pain is not where your story ends, it is where God begins a brand new thing in your life. Rejection is one of the most painful experiences a person can endure. It cuts deep, it wounds the soul, and it often leaves scars that take years to heal. But what if I told you that rejection was never meant to break you? What if I told you that every door that closed, every person who walked away, every betrayal you endured was actually God's way of redirecting you towards something greater? You see, we often cry over the people who left us, the opportunities we missed, and the relationships that ended. We replay the hurtful words, the moments of abandonment, the times we felt unseen, unloved, or overlooked. We ask God, why did they do this to me? Why did I have to go through this? Why wasn't I good enough? But what if I told you that God allowed them to reject you because He never intended for them to stay? What if I told you that their absence is not a loss, it's a divine setup? There are some people who are only meant to be in your life for a season, and if God didn't allow them to reject you, you would have held on to something that was never meant to last. There are some places where you were never supposed to settle, and if He didn't allow the door to slam shut, you would have stayed somewhere beneath your calling. There are some opportunities that look good, but they would have taken you off course. So God made sure you didn't get what you thought you wanted. You see, rejection is painful because we experience it through the lens of loss. We think if they rejected me, there must be something wrong with me. We assume that rejection means we are unworthy, unwanted, or unqualified. But rejection is not a reflection of your value, it is a reflection of God's protection. It is not a sign that you are lacking, it is a sign that God is leading. He is guiding you away from people, places, and things that are too small for where He is taking you. Think about it, if Joseph had never been rejected by his brothers, he never would have made it to the palace. If David had never been overlooked by his father, he never would have been anointed as king. If Jesus had never been rejected by the Pharisees, He never would have gone to the cross and fulfilled His purpose. The rejection wasn't a mistake. The rejection was a redirection. Some of you are sitting in the middle of your rejection season right now, wondering why it had to happen this way. You feel like you've been cast aside, abandoned, misunderstood, but I want you to hear me today. God has not forgotten you. God has not abandoned you. He is positioning you. He is moving you. He is aligning you with something so much bigger than what you thought you lost. That person who walked away from you, they had to go, because if they had stayed, they would have limited you. That job you didn't get, it wasn't your job, because God has something better, something that aligns with your calling, something that will use your gifts in a way you never imagined. That relationship that ended, it had to end, because the person God has for you is someone who will love you the way He designed you to be loved. Rejection is never easy, but it is necessary. Because if God didn't allow them to reject you, you might have settled for less. You might have stayed in a place that was beneath your purpose. You might have accepted something that was comfortable, but not God ordained. And let me tell you something, God will never let you settle for anything less than His best. So instead of mourning over who left, start praising God for what's coming. Instead of crying over the opportunity that passed you by, start preparing for the door that's about to open. Instead of questioning your worth, start recognizing that rejection is often a sign that you are too valuable to be mishandled. Because here's the truth, the people who rejected you didn't have the capacity to carry you where God is taking you. The place that turned you away couldn't hold the anointing on your life. The opportunity that passed you by wasn't big enough for the destiny God has placed inside of you. You are not forgotten. You are not overlooked. You are being positioned. You are being elevated. You are being moved into a space where you can fully walk in your calling. I need you to wipe your tears and lift your head. I need you to stop chasing people who walked away. I need you to stop mourning over doors that God Himself shut. Because what He has for you is greater than what you lost. What is ahead of you is better than what is behind you. What He is preparing for you will make you forget the pain of what you thought you missed. Because when God opens the right door, you won't have to fight for it. When God sends the right people, you won't have to beg for their love. When God brings the right opportunity, it will fit you so perfectly that you will wonder why you ever wanted anything else. So today, I need you to shift your perspective. Rejection is not the end of your story. Rejection is the tool God is using to push you into your destiny. What you thought was a curse was actually a blessing. What you thought was a loss was actually a gain. What you thought was breaking you was actually making you. And when you look back, when you finally step into what God has for you, you will thank Him for every rejection. You will praise Him for every closed door. You will realize that every no was leading you to a better yes. Every abandonment was setting you up for divine alignment. Every betrayal was part of God's bigger plan. So don't fight the rejection. Don't resist the process. Trust that God is moving, that He is shifting, that He is working all things together for your good. Because what He has for you is so much greater than what you thought you wanted. And when you finally receive it, you will look back and say, God, thank you for not letting me settle. Thank you for loving me enough to let them reject me. Thank you for using what hurt me to heal me. Thank you for redirecting me to something so much greater than I ever imagined. Judas had a purpose. Yes, the one who betrayed you, the one who smiled in your face but stabbed you in the back, the one you trusted with your heart, your dreams, your loyalty, God allowed them in your life for a reason. I know it hurt. I know you cried. I know you never saw it coming. But I need you to hear me today. Their betrayal was part of the plan. You see, when we think about betrayal, we think about pain, heartbreak, and loss. We think about the knife in our back, the wound that refuses to heal, the moments when we felt like we couldn't go on. But what if I told you that the betrayal you experienced was a divine setup? What if I told you that God strategically placed that person in your life, not to destroy you, but to push you into your destiny? Jesus had 12 disciples, but only one betrayed Him, and that one betrayal led Him straight to the cross. That one betrayal set the stage for the greatest victory in human history. Without Judas, there would have been no crucifixion. Without the crucifixion, there would have been no resurrection. Without the resurrection, there would have been no salvation. So what am I saying? I'm saying that your Judas had a role to play. Think about it. The people who betrayed you, the ones who talked about you, the ones who turned their backs on you, they were necessary. Because if they hadn't betrayed you, you might have stayed in a place where you were never meant to remain. If they hadn't hurt you, you wouldn't have discovered your true strength. If they hadn't walked away, you wouldn't have learned to lean on God instead of people. God will often use betrayal as a tool to separate you from people who are never meant to go where He is taking you. The problem is we get so attached. We love deeply. We trust easily. We invest in relationships thinking they will last forever. And then when betrayal comes, we are devastated. We ask God, why would you let this happen? Why would you allow someone so close to me to turn against me? But God says I allowed it because they were never meant to stay. I allowed it because their role in your life was temporary. I allowed it because their departure is making room for your elevation. Judas was close to Jesus. He walked with Him, talked with Him, sat at the same table and shared meals with Him. But just because someone is close to you doesn't mean they are for you. Just because they smile in your face doesn't mean they won't sell you out for their own gain. Some of the greatest betrayals don't come from strangers, they come from the people you trusted the most. But here's the powerful truth: Judas didn't win. The betrayal didn't stop Jesus. The betrayal didn't cancel His purpose. The betrayal didn't ruin His destiny. In fact, the betrayal set everything in motion. The betrayal wasn't a setback, it was a setup. The betrayal didn't weaken Him, it positioned Him. And the same is true for you. That betrayal you went through, it wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something greater. That person who hurt you, they played their role, and now it's time to move forward. That friend who turned against you, they were never meant to stay in your life forever. Their assignment was temporary. I know it's hard to accept. I know the pain feels unbearable. I know you wish things could have been different, but you have to understand God is not surprised by betrayal. He factored it into your destiny. He knew exactly who would betray you before they ever entered your life. And yet, He still allowed it because He knew that what they meant for evil, He would turn for your good. You don't have to get revenge. You don't have to prove anything to them. You don't have to waste your energy trying to make them see your worth. Let them go. Let them do what they do, because what they did to hurt you, God is using to help you. What they did to break you, God is using to build you. You see, Judas thought he was doing something that would stop Jesus. He thought his betrayal would end the story. But what he didn't know was that Jesus was already 10 steps ahead. What he didn't realize was that Jesus was walking in divine purpose. And when you are walking in purpose, betrayal cannot break you. When you are walking in purpose, people can plot against you, but they cannot cancel your calling. When you are walking in purpose, no amount of betrayal, no amount of slander, no amount of backstabbing stop what God has ordained for your life. You have to get to the place where you stop crying over Judas, stop losing sleep over people who walked away. Stop trying to fix relationships that God allowed to break. Judas was necessary. The betrayal was necessary. The pain was necessary, because without it, you would have stayed in a place that was too small for what God has called you to do. If they betrayed you, let them go. If they walked away, let them go. If they turned their back on you, let them go. Their job is done. Their season is over. Their role in your story is ended. And hear me, when one chapter ends, a new one begins. The betrayal wasn't the final scene. The pain wasn't the end of the story. God is writing something greater. And when he is finished, you will look back and realize that the very thing that hurt you the most was the thing that positioned you for your greatest blessing. So wipe your tears, stand up straight. There is a reason why you had to go through the pain. There is a reason why you had to endure the heartache, the suffering, the disappointment. You may not see it right now. You may not understand it in this moment, but I promise you, God does not allow pain without purpose. Every tear you cried, every sleepless night, every moment of rejection, betrayal, and loneliness was not wasted. It was not in vain. It was a part of something bigger. You see, we often think that pain is the enemy. We think that suffering means God has abandoned us, that hardship means God has turned his back on us. But what if I told you that the very thing you're running from, the very thing you're praying for God to remove, is the very thing he is using to elevate you? What if I told you that the pain you're experiencing right now is actually the fire that is refining you, shaping you, making you strong? Because here's the truth. Nothing great comes without struggle. No anointing comes without crushing. No calling comes without trials. And sometimes the only way to step into your next level is to go through a season of suffering. It's not because God doesn't love you. It's not because he has forgotten you. It's because he is preparing you. He is stretching you. He is molding you into the person he created you to be. Look at every great person in the Bible. Joseph had to be thrown into a pit before he reached the palace. David had to run for his life before he became king. Moses had to wander in the wilderness before he could lead his people to freedom. Even Jesus himself had to endure the cross before he could wear the crown. Suffering is a part of the process. Pain is a part of the journey. And the ones who are used by God the most are often the ones who have suffered the most. I know it doesn't feel good. I know you're wondering, God, why me? Why do I have to go through this? Why does it hurt so much? But instead of asking why me, start asking, what are you trying to teach me, Lord? What are you doing in me? What are you preparing me for? Because I promise you, there is something on the other side of this pain. There is something waiting for you beyond this storm. Sometimes God allows pain to remove things from our lives that we wouldn't let go of on our own. There are relationships that you were holding on to, friendships that you were trying to keep, places that you were trying to stay in that were beneath your calling. And if God hadn't allowed the pain, you would have never walked away. If God hadn't allowed the heartbreak, you would have settled for something less than is best. If God hadn't allowed the discomfort, you would have stayed in a place that was never meant to hold you. Because here's the truth, growth is painful. Transformation is uncomfortable. Becoming who God created you to be requires a level of breaking, a level of stretching, a level of discomfort that most people are unwilling to go through. But if you can endure the process, if you can push through the pain, if you can hold on even when it hurts, You will come out on the other side stronger, wiser, more powerful than you ever imagined. And let me tell you something. There is purpose in your pain. God never wastes a wound. Every scar tells a story. Every battle you have fought, every hardship you have endured, every season of suffering has been building something inside of you. It has been shaping your character, deepening your faith, making you into a warrior. Because let me tell you, warriors are not made in comfort. Warriors are made in battle. You didn't go through this just to stay the same. You didn't endure all of this just to go back to who you used to be. The old version of you couldn't handle what's coming next. The old version of you wasn't strong enough for the assignment God has on your life. That's why he had to take you through the fire. That's why he had to allow the crushing, because he was making you into something greater. Some of you have been through so much pain that you started believing that suffering was your identity. You started believing that heartbreak was just a part of who you are. But let me tell you something. The pain was not meant to define you. The pain was meant to refine you. You are not your past. You are not your wounds. You are not your trauma. You are a child of God, and everything you have been through is working together for your good. And when you come out of this, because you will come out, you won't even recognize yourself. The things that used to break you will no longer have power over you. The people who used to hurt you will no longer have access to you. The situations that used to shake you will no longer move you, because you will have been transformed. You will have been elevated. You will have stepped into a new level of faith, a new level of power, a new level of anointing. And the people who watched you suffer, the people who thought you wouldn't survive, the people who left you in your darkest moment, they are going to have to watch God bless you. They are going to have to watch you rise. They are going to have to watch as the very thing that was meant to destroy you becomes the thing that propels you into your destiny. So don't give up. Don't lose hope. Don't let the pain make you bitter. Let it make you better. Let it strengthen you. Let it refine you. Let it do the work it was sent to do. Because when this is over, you are going to step into a season so powerful, so blessed, so anointed, that you will look back and say, God, I didn't understand it then, but now I see. Thank you for the pain. Thank you for the breaking. Thank you for allowing me to go through the fire, because now I am stronger than ever before. There are some battles you had to fight alone. There are some seasons you had to walk through by yourself. There were moments when you looked around and realized that the people who once stood beside you were no longer there. You called and no one answered. You reached out, but no one responded. You were left alone, isolated, abandoned, wondering why God would allow you to go through so much pain with no one by your side. But what if I told you that God had to separate you to elevate you? What if I told you that your isolation wasn't punishment, it was preparation? See, when God gets ready to take you to another level, he often has to strip away everything and everyone that can't go with you. And it hurts. It's painful to watch people walk away. It's painful to be misunderstood, to feel like nobody sees you, to go through trials with no one to lean on. But sometimes God has to pull you away from the noise, the distractions, the opinions, the influences that could keep you from hearing his voice clearly. Because let's be honest, there were times when you were so busy listening to people that you couldn't hear God. There were times when you were so caught up in relationships that you lost sight of your purpose. There were times when you put your trust in people instead of putting your trust in him. And God said, I need to remove them so you can rely on me. Think about it. Some of the greatest transformations in life happen in isolation. The caterpillar doesn't become a butterfly in a crowd. It goes into a cocoon alone. It is in the darkness and the stillness that transformation takes place. And some of you are in that cocoon season right now. You feel cut off. You feel forgotten. You feel like you're in a place of silence. But What if I told you that God is doing his greatest work in you during this season of separation? See, we don't like being alone. We don't like walking through battles without a support system. But sometimes the only way God can reveal his strength to you is by allowing you to have no one else to depend on but him. If people had rescued you, you would have given them the credit. If someone had come to your aid, you would have thought that they were the source of your breakthrough. But God said, no, this time I want you to know that it was me. It wasn't your friends. It wasn't your connections. It wasn't your own strength. It was me who sustained you, who carried you, who brought you through. And that's why some of you had to go through this season alone. That's why God allowed certain people to turn their backs on you. That's why he closed certain doors, removed certain relationships, and stripped away certain things. Because he needed you to know that your strength comes from him. He needed you to see that your survival was not dependent on people, it was dependent on him. When Jesus was preparing for his greatest mission, the cross, he went to the Garden of Gethsemane to pray. And do you remember what happened? The disciples, his closest friends, fell asleep. They couldn't even stay awake to pray with him in his greatest moment of agony. He was alone. But it was necessary, because there are some battles you have to fight in solitude. There are some assignments that no one else can help you carry. There are some callings that require you to walk through a season of loneliness before you step into your purpose. But hear me. Just because you feel alone doesn't mean you are alone. Just because people left doesn't mean God left. Just because you don't see anyone standing beside you doesn't mean you're abandoned. God has been with you the entire time. He has been strengthening you, refining you, shaping you into the person he created you to be. And when this season is over, because it will end, you will come out of it with a new level of clarity, a new level of strength, a new level of wisdom. You will look back and realize that the isolation wasn't punishment, it was preparation. You will see that the people who walked away were never meant to go where God is taking you. You will understand that what felt like a season of loss was actually a season of growth. So don't despise the separation. Don't resist the solitude. God is doing something in you that requires this time alone. And when he is finished, when the cocoon breaks open, when the season shifts, you will step into a new level of purpose, a new level of anointing, a new level of destiny. And the very people who left you will have to watch as God elevates you beyond anything you could have imagined. Stay faithful, stay obedient. Trust that the loneliness is temporary, but the transformation is eternal. God had to separate you to elevate you. And when he is done, you will not recognize the person you have become. You may not understand it now. You may be sitting in the middle of your pain, looking at the wreckage of what was once a relationship, a friendship, a dream, wondering why things had to fall apart the way they did. You may be asking God, why did they treat me like that? Why did they have to hurt me so deeply? Why did I have to endure that kind of betrayal? But what if I told you that the people who hurt you did exactly what they were supposed to do? What if I told you that their mistreatment, their betrayal, their rejection, their cruelty, it was all a part of a divine setup? What if I told you that God allowed them to hurt you because he knew that without that pain, you would have never stepped into the person you were meant to become? See, sometimes the people who hurt us are actually being used by God without even realizing it. They think they're breaking you, but they're actually building you. They think they're tearing you down, but they're actually setting you up for elevation. Because here's the truth. Without adversity, there is no growth. Without pain, there is no transformation. Without betrayal, there is no breakthrough. Look at the story of Joseph. His own brothers threw him into a pit, sold him into slavery, and left him for dead. Can you imagine the kind of pain he must have felt? Can you imagine the heartbreak of realizing that the very people who were supposed to love him, protect him, stand by his side, were the same ones who betrayed him? And yet what they meant for evil, God used for good. Their betrayal was the very thing that positioned Joseph for greatness. Had they never heard him, he never would have ended up in Egypt. Had he never ended up in Egypt, he never would have been put in prison. Had he never been put in prison, he never would have been called to interpret Pharaoh's dream. And had he never interpreted that dream, he never would have been promoted to second in command over the entire nation. Do you see it? The pain had a purpose. The betrayal had a purpose. The mistreatment had a purpose. If Joseph had held on to bitterness, if he had spent his life angry at the ones who hurt him, he never would have been able to step into the destiny that God had prepared for him. And the same is true for you. You cannot afford to stay stuck in the pain of what they did to you. You cannot afford to let their betrayal define you. You cannot afford to let bitterness take root in your heart and rob you of your destiny. God is saying, yes, they hurt you, but I allowed it. Yes, they betrayed you, but I saw it coming. Yes, they broke your heart, but I am going to use that very thing to bring you into a place of blessing that you never would have reached on your own. Think about it. If they had never hurt you, you probably would have stayed connected to them. If they had never mistreated you, you might have spent your whole life trying to please them, trying to make them love you, trying to earn their approval, but their rejection forced you to turn to God. Their abandonment forced you to discover who you really are. Their mistreatment pushed you into a level of faith, a level of strength, a level of resilience that you never would have developed otherwise. So stop crying over who left. Stop replaying the hurt in your mind. Stop trying to figure out why they did what they did. Stop waiting for an apology that may never come. They did what they did. It hurt. But now it's time to move forward. It's time to take that pain and let God turn it into power. It's time to take that betrayal and let God use it as the foundation for your breakthrough. You see, when people mistreat you, they are revealing who they are. Their actions are a reflection of their own brokenness, their own insecurities, their own issues. And the enemy would love for you to take their mistreatment personally. He would love for you to let it shatter your self-worth. He would love for you to internalize their rejection and believe that you are unworthy, that you are unlovable, that you are not enough. But the devil is a liar. You are not what they did to you. You are not the words they spoke over you. You are not the sum of your past wounds. You are a child of God. You are chosen. You are anointed. And nothing they did, nothing they could do can change the destiny that God has placed on your life. So the next time you start to feel the weight of their betrayal, the next time you start to replay the pain in your mind, the next time you start to let bitterness take root, I want you to shift your perspective. I want you to stop seeing yourself as a victim and start seeing yourself as someone who was set up for victory. I want you to start thanking God, not just for the good things, but for the pain, for the rejection, for the betrayal. Because if they hadn't hurt you, you wouldn't be here. If they hadn't mistreated you, you wouldn't have grown. If they hadn't turned their back on you, you wouldn't have learned how to stand on your own 2 feet. You wouldn't have discovered how strong you really are. You wouldn't have tapped into the power that God has placed inside of you. And here's the most powerful part. One day, the very people who hurt you are going to have to watch you rise. They are going to have to watch as God blesses you, as He elevates you, as He opens doors that no man can shut. They are going to have to see that everything they did to try to break you only made you stronger. So walk with confidence, hold your head high, let go of the pain, the resentment, the bitterness, because it is only weighing you down. Let God heal you. Let Him use what they did as the foundation for your next level, because He is getting ready to turn your pain into purpose. your wounds into wisdom, your strength. And when he is finished, you will look back and say, God, I didn't understand it then, but now I see. Thank you for the hurt. Thank you for the rejection. Thank you for using what was meant to break me to bless me. There are moments in life when you will feel like the very people you love, the very ones you trusted, the ones you gave your heart to, turned around and treated you like you were nothing. They used you, they took advantage of your kindness. They walked away without a second thought. And you were left standing there, broken, confused, asking God, how could they do this to me? How could someone I cared for so deeply hurt me like this? You see, when people hurt us, we often make the mistake of thinking that their actions define our worth. We assume that their mistreatment means we weren't enough, that something was wrong with us, that we should have been different. But let me tell you something. What they did to you was never about you. It was about them. It was about the condition of their heart. It was about their brokenness, their dysfunction, their inability to love properly. And yet God still used them to push you into the next level of your life. Because here's the thing. Some people were never meant to stay in your life. Some people were only there for a season. And the only way God could get you to let them go was to allow them to hurt you. Because if they had been kind, if they had been loyal, if they had loved you the way you loved them, you would have held on to them forever. You would have continued trying to make the relationship work. You would have ignored the signs, overlooked the red flags, and settled for less than what God had for you. But God saw what you couldn't see. He saw that they weren't capable of going where he was taking you. He saw that they didn't have the capacity to love you the way you deserved. He saw that if you kept them in your life, they would have drained you, distracted you, and kept you from walking fully in your purpose. So he allowed them to break you so you would finally be willing to walk away. Think about it. How many times did God give you signs? How many times did he whisper to your spirit that something wasn't right? How many times did he show you that they weren't for you, that they didn't truly value you, that they weren't operating in the love of Christ? But you ignored it. You made excuses. You told yourself that things would get better. And because you wouldn't let them go willingly, God had to let their actions make the decision for you. You see, we don't like pain. We don't like rejection. We don't like feeling abandoned. But what if I told you that their rejection was actually your protection? What if I told you that God had to let them walk away because keeping them in your life would have cost you too much? It would have cost you your peace. It would have cost you your self-worth. It would have cost you your focus, your anointing, your purpose. And God loved you too much to let that happen. So yes, it hurt. Yes, it broke you. Yes, you cried tears that no one saw. You had nights where you couldn't sleep, days where you didn't think you would ever feel whole again. But what you didn't realize in those moments was that God was healing you. He was stripping away everything that was connected to that toxic relationship, that unhealthy friendship, that broken connection. He was removing the damage they left behind, restoring the parts of you that they tried to destroy. And now here you are, stronger, wiser, more discerning. You don't tolerate the same things you used to tolerate. You don't settle the way you used to settle. You've learned to love yourself in a way you never did before. Because when they walked away, you found something greater. You found you found your strength, your voice, your identity. And most importantly, you found out that God was with you the entire time. See, some of you thought you needed them. You thought you needed their validation, their approval, their love. But God had to let them break you so you could see that you never needed them, you only ever needed him. And the moment you realized that, the moment you turned your heart fully to God and let him heal you, that was the moment you stepped into your power. That was the moment you stopped looking back, stopped replaying the pain, stopped longing for, what was never meant to be yours. And let me tell you something, when God removes people from your life, he always replaces them with better. He always brings people who will love you purely, who will honor you, who will see your value the way God sees your value. So don't mourn what you lost. Don't sit in regret. Don't let their betrayal keep you bitter. Instead, stand tall and know that their rejection was God's redirection. Their mistreatment was God's way of repositioning you. Because here's what's about to happen. God is getting ready to bless you in front of the very people who doubted you. He's getting ready to elevate you in front of the same ones who thought they broke you. They thought you wouldn't survive without them. They thought you would always be hurting, always be bitter, always be stuck in the pain of what they did. But what they didn't realize was that all they did was push you closer to your destiny. So the next time you think about what they did, the next time the enemy tries to make you feel small because of how they treated you, I want you to lift your head up and say, "Thank you, Lord. Thank you for removing what was never meant for me. Thank you for allowing me to go through that pain, because without it, I never would have discovered my true worth. Without it, I never would have stepped into the person you created me to be. Because what was meant to break you, God is using to build you. What was meant to destroy you, God is turning into the very thing that will propel you into greatness." And the best part, the people who thought they won, the ones who thought they had the power to hurt you, the ones who mistook your kindness for weakness, they are going to have to watch as God prepares a table for you in their presence. They are going to have to see you walk in your blessing, walk in your anointing, walk in your divine purpose. So don't worry about revenge. Don't waste your energy trying to prove anything to them. God is handling it. God is taking care of it. You just keep moving forward. You just keep walking in purpose. Because your future is greater than your past. And what's coming next is so much bigger than anything you've lost. And when it's all said and done, you'll look back and realize that what you thought was the worst thing that ever happened to you was actually the best thing God ever allowed. You'll see that every tear, every heartbreak, every moment of pain was necessary, because without it, you never would have become the person you are today. And that person is unstoppable. That person is powerful. That person is walking in victory. So let them go. Let the pain go. Let the anger go. Trust that God is in control, and watch as he takes what was meant for evil and turns it into something greater than you ever imagined. Because he is not just restoring you, he is elevating you. And when he's done, you will stand in front of the world, not as someone who was broken, but as someone who was built by the very thing that was meant to break them. There comes a point in your life when you realize that the people who hurt you were never meant to stay. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't just bad luck. It wasn't even because you did something wrong. It was a divine setup. God allowed them to come into your life, and he allowed them to leave. And if he allowed it, then there was a reason. If he let them betray you, if he let them lie on you, if he let them turn their back on you, that means there was something he needed to do in you that could only happen through that pain. You see, sometimes we hold on to people who were only supposed to be temporary. We attach ourselves to relationships, friendships, and connections that were never meant to last. And when God tries to remove them, we fight it. We beg him to let them stay. We do everything we can to hold on to what he is trying to take away. But here's the truth, you will never receive what God has for you until you let go of what he never meant for you. And that's why he let them hurt you. Because if they had treated you right, you would have stayed. If they had loved you properly, you would have continued to invest in them. If they had been loyal, you never would have walked away. So God had to let them hurt you to break the attachment. He had to let them disappoint you so you would stop trying to fix something he never wanted to last. Look back at your life. Think about the people you cried over, the ones you lost sleep over, the ones you spent months, even years trying to understand. At the time, you thought you couldn't live without them. At the time, you thought your heart would never heal. But look at you now. Look at how far you've come. Look at how God carried you through it, how he healed you, how he strengthened you. And not only that, look at how he replaced what you lost with something better. Look at how he sent new people into your life, people who love you for who you really are, people who appreciate you, people who support you the way you always supported others. You see, when God allows a person to hurt you, it's not because he's punishing you. It's not because he's forgotten about you. It's because he is making room for something greater. He is shifting you. He is positioning you. He is making sure that nothing and no one stands in the way of where he is taking you. And if they had stayed, they would have held you back. If they had treated you well, you would have built your life around them instead of around him. And that's why you have to stop mourning over what he removed. That's why you have to stop going back to the same people who keep hurting you. That's why you have to stop trying to make sense of what they did and start trusting that God knows what he's doing. Because the truth is, not everyone is meant to go where you're going. Not everyone can handle the weight of your calling. Not everyone has the capacity to walk with you into your destiny. Some people were only assigned to your life for a short time, and the sooner you realize that, the sooner you can stop wasting energy on what was never meant to last. You have to understand God is intentional. He doesn't make mistakes. He doesn't allow pain without a purpose. And if he let them walk away, it's because he has something so much greater for you on the other side. But you'll never receive it if you keep looking back. You'll never walk into your future if you keep reliving your past. So it's time to let go. It's time to stop asking why they hurt you and start thanking God that they did. Because if they hadn't, you wouldn't have been able to step into what's next. If they hadn't, you wouldn't have learned how strong you really are. If they hadn't, you wouldn't have drawn closer to God in the way that you have. Because the pain pushed you. It pushed you out of your comfort zone. It pushed you into purpose. It pushed you into your destiny. It made you pray harder. It made you trust God more. It made you realize that your worth was never in them, it was always in him. And one day, the same people who hurt you, the same ones who thought they broke you, are going to see you walking in the blessing of God. They are going to see you thriving, see you prospering, see you shining in a way they never expected. And they are going to wonder how you made it. They are going to wonder how you healed, how you kept going, how you stepped into something so much greater. And when that moment comes, you won't even feel the need to explain. You won't feel the need to prove anything, because you will be so busy walking in the favor of God that their opinion won't even matter. You will be so wrapped in the blessings of God that you won't even remember the pain they caused. So let them go. Let them talk. Let them misunderstand you. Let them think they won. Because while they're busy watching your past, God is preparing your future. While they're stuck in their bitterness, God is elevating you to a place they will never reach. And when you finally step into everything God has for you, you will look back and realize that their rejection was actually your redirection. Their betrayal was actually your breakthrough. And the pain they caused was actually the very thing God used to set you up for the blessing that was waiting all along. There are moments in life when the people you thought would always stand by you turn against you. The ones you trusted the most, the ones you poured into, the ones you sacrificed for, suddenly change, and you're left wondering, how could they do this to me? You gave them love, and they gave you betrayal. You stood by them, and they walked away when you needed them most. You covered them, defended them, and in return, they exposed your weaknesses, mocked your struggles, and left you to fight battles alone. And it's in those moments of heartbreak and confusion that you ask, God, why did you allow this? But what if I told you that their betrayal was a part of the plan? What if I told you that God needed them to hurt you? That if they hadn't done what they did, you wouldn't be where you are now. What if I told you that their rejection wasn't a setback, but a setup? Because sometimes the only way God can separate you from the wrong people is to allow them to show you their true colors. See, the problem is when we love people, we tend to ignore the signs. We see the warning signs, but we make excuses. We feel the shift in their energy, but we hold on anyway. We hear what God is telling us, but we don't want to go. So when we won't remove them ourselves, God has to let them hurt us, so we'll finally see what he's been trying to show us all along. It wasn't that you weren't enough. It wasn't that you did something wrong. It wasn't that you weren't worthy of their love. No, they weren't worthy of you. They weren't capable of handling your heart. They weren't equipped to go where God is taking you. And instead of trying to hold on to what was never meant to stay, you have to trust that God knows what he's doing. When you look back at the story of Jesus, even he had to experience betrayal. Even he had someone in his circle who turned on him. Judas sat at his table. Judas walked with him. Judas saw the miracles, heard the teachings, experienced the power of God firsthand. And yet when the opportunity came, Judas still betrayed him. But here's the thing, Jesus knew Judas was going to betray him. He knew what was coming. And he still allowed him to sit at the table. Why? Because Judas had a purpose. His betrayal was necessary for the crucifixion. And without the crucifixion, there would be no resurrection. And that's what you have to understand sometimes. The people who hurt you were necessary for your destiny. Sometimes their betrayal was part of the process. Without the pain they caused, you wouldn't have been pushed into your purpose. Without their rejection, you wouldn't have found your true worth. Without their abandonment, you wouldn't have learned to rely fully on God. So stop mourning over what left. Stop crying over what they did. Stop feeling like you lost something valuable. Because the truth is, you didn't lose anything they did. They lost someone who was real. They lost someone who loved them with a pure heart. They lost someone who prayed for them, stood by them, and had their best interests at heart. And one day they will look back and realize that they let go of something they will never find again. But by the time they realize it, you will have already moved on. You will have already healed. You will have already walked into the greater things that God had waiting for you. Because God never allows something to be taken from your life without replacing it with something better. You thought they were your future, but God was only using them as part of the process. You thought they were going to be in your life forever, but God knew they were only temporary. And instead of trying to figure out why they did what they did, instead of trying to make sense of it, your only job is to keep moving forward. Because what's coming next is greater than what you lost. What's coming next is going to make you thank God that they left. What's coming next is going to make you grateful for every betrayal, every rejection, every moment of pain. Because in the end, you're going to see that God was setting you up for something so much greater than you ever imagined. So wipe your tears, hold your head up, and walk boldly into what's next. Because your destiny is too big to be tied to the ones who were never meant to stay. There comes a time when you have to stop questioning why they hurt you and start trusting that God allowed it for a reason. You have to reach a point where you stop replaying the betrayal in your mind, stop trying to figure out what you did wrong, stop dwelling on how they walked away, and instead recognize that their departure was part of God's divine plan. It may not feel like it now. It may not make sense in this moment. But one day you will look back and understand that everything they did, the lies, the manipulation, the abandonment, was all necessary for your growth, for your elevation, for your purpose. The problem is we hold on to people longer than we should. We cling to relationships that God never intended to last forever. We build connections with people who were only meant to be in our lives for a season. And when that season is over, we resist the change. We fight to keep them. We struggle to understand why they suddenly turned against us, why they stopped treating us the way they used to, why their love became cold. But what if I told you that they had to change, that God had to let them turn on you? That if they had continued to love you the way they once did, you would have never let them go? Sometimes God will allow someone's heart to shift so that he can shift you. He will allow their betrayal to push you into a new level. He will allow their rejection to redirect you into the place he intended for you all along. Because if they had stayed, they would have hindered your progress. If they had continued to be in your life, you would have settled for less than what God had for you. So instead of seeing their betrayal as your breaking point, you need to start seeing it as your breakthrough. Look at the story of Joseph. His own brothers betrayed him. The very people who should have protected him, encouraged him, and celebrated his dreams were the ones who threw him into a pit. They stripped him of his coat, but they couldn't strip him of his calling. They thought they were destroying him, but in reality, they were positioning him, because had they never sold him into slavery, he would have never made it to Egypt. Had he never been betrayed by Potiphar's wife, he would have never ended up in prison. Had he never gone to prison, he would have never met the cupbearer who later recommended him for Pharaoh. And had he never met Pharaoh, he would have never stepped into his destiny as the ruler of Egypt. Do you see it now? Every betrayal was a part of the plan. Every rejection was a step toward his elevation. Every painful moment was a necessary piece of the puzzle that led him into the fullness of what God had for him. And the same is true for you. The people who hurt you were never in control of your destiny. The people who lied on you, the ones who abandoned you, the ones who betrayed you, they thought they were breaking you, but they were actually setting you up for something greater. They thought they were burying you, but they didn't realize that you were a seed. And a seed has to be buried before it can grow. A seed has to go through darkness before it can reach the light. A seed has to be pressed into the soil, isolated and alone before it can rise. So stop mourning over who left. Stop trying to figure out why they treated you the way they did. Stop holding on to resentment and bitterness, because if you stay stuck in the pain, you will miss the promise. If you keep looking back at who hurt you, you will miss what God is trying to do in your life right now. God has something so much greater for you. He has a plan that goes beyond anything you could have imagined. But you will never step into it if you keep holding on to what He is trying to remove. You have to trust Him. You have to believe that He knows what He's doing. You have to be willing to walk away from what was so that you can step into what will be. And one day, when you're standing in the place that God prepared for you, when you're walking in the fullness of your purpose, when you're thriving in a way you never thought possible, you're going to look back at the people who hurt you and realize that if they hadn't done what they did, you wouldn't be where you are now. You're going to see that their betrayal was a blessing in disguise. You're going to understand that the pain wasn't punishment, it was preparation. And at that moment, you won't even be angry anymore. You won't even feel the need to prove anything, because you will be too busy walking in your blessing to be bothered by what they did in your past. So let them go. Release the pain. Step into what's next. Because your destiny is calling, and the people who hurt you were never meant to go with you. So now, after all the pain, after all the betrayal, after all the nights you cried yourself to sleep, after all the moments you wondered if you would ever heal, look at you. You're still standing. You're still here. And not only are you here, but you're stronger, wiser, and closer to God than you've ever been. The very thing that was meant to break you actually built you. The very rejection that was supposed to destroy you actually directed you into your destiny. So stop looking back. Stop questioning why they did what they did. Stop wondering if they ever cared. Because the truth is it doesn't even matter anymore. What matters is what's ahead. What matters is where God is taking you. What matters is that you didn't let their betrayal stop you. What matters is that you survived, and not only survived, but you are about to thrive. Because the best revenge is not anger. The best revenge is not proving them wrong. The best revenge is elevation. The best revenge is walking in the fullness of God's plan for your life. The best revenge is living so abundantly blessed that their betrayal becomes irrelevant. So let them watch. Let them wonder how you made it. Let them be confused about how you're still smiling, still rising, still prospering. And when they ask, how did you do it? When they ask, how did you overcome? You can look at them with peace in your heart and say, because what you meant for evil, God turned it for my good. And that's why you're going to be okay. That's why you're going to come out of this better than you ever imagined. Because when God is for you, it doesn't matter who is against you. When God has a plan for your life, no betrayal, no rejection, no heartbreak can stop it. So walk boldly into what's next. Let go of what was. Trust God for what's coming. And watch Him turn your pain into power, your wounds into wisdom, and your tears into testimony. Because the story isn't over. The best is yet to come.